Faith, in its purest form, is a comfort, a guiding star for the lost. But when that faith is sharpened into a blade, it no longer guides. It wounds. Tonight's tale, dear listeners, is not only a dramatization, it is a reckoning, a reminder of what happens when piety is poisoned with zealotry, and when justice is dictated by gods who demand blood. You see, many out there see the absence of faith in Nethermore as a misguided waste of resources. Oh, we too know about these gods that priests, clerics, and bishops speak so highly about. But make no mistake, we know all too well the consequences of worship far outweigh the benefits of their benevolence. And you too will see why we choose to walk away from such ignorant beliefs. You've no doubt heard the name Rolando Altamar, the butcher of Costa Bravia, spoken in hushed awe in coastal taverns and prison cells. Pirate, murderer, monster. The apostles of the Nightfall Harvest would have you believe he was a scourge sent by the depths themselves. But listen closely, and you may come to see a different truth, one far more dangerous. A man may become a monster by choice or by design. This is the story of the immortal plunderer. A shot to the head, a sword through the heart, even toppling overboard from a ship after being too drunk to stand. As Rolando Altamar stood at the gallows, hands bound behind his back and noose loosely hanging around his neck, he thought about the ways a pirate like himself would become the stuff of legends and tavern tales. Being executed for acts of piracy, while some pompous fat bastard droned on about his crimes, was certainly not one of the ways he envisioned meeting his end. Consequences of a bad call is all it was. For some time now, the competency of Captain Draven has been put into question. But this was the greatest blunder of all. It was a simple plan. Ambush a convoy on its way to Arcos, claim their supply of astral silver and goods, then disappear into the fog. Apparently, the captain neglected to mention that this convoy was being escorted by a fleet of the Golden Harbingers. They never stood a chance. Fortunately, they left the executing to a small town from the Republic called Costa Bravia. That still didn't make the wait any less boring. The town's governor was overseeing the execution himself. How touching. This was a very small town, barely any fortifications to speak of, only a handful of guards from what Rolando and Draven's crew could see. It shouldn't be surprising that the hanging of more than 36 pirates would be such a spectacle. The town square was so small that it wasn't able to accommodate all the platforms, so the pirates would be hung in waves. But at the center of the plaza was where the attention currently was. There were 3 platforms with 5 nooses each around the edges of the plaza. At the center were 6 gibbets lined up in a circle and draped over with cloth like oversized bird cages. The Harbingers had been careful to take care of the crew members that were already turned. Those would be the first to go. Sadly, as is the custom of these small-town people, it wouldn't happen until a prayer was offered to one god or the other. It wasn't surprising to see that this town knelt to the apostles of the Nightfall Harvest, based on the cloth the priest making his way to the center wore. Rolando rolled his eyes and groaned. For Kainari's sake, not a fucking prayer. Who do you think they'll pray to? My money is on the All-Mother, Maressa. What do you think, Altamar? Rolando turned his head to his fellow crewmate. If he was to hang, he was glad it was in the company of Jean Duval. At least he had better humor than most for these kind of spectacles. With his charming grin, loose cravat, and eyes that danced like twin daggers, Duval looked more like a stage actor than a killer, but Rolando knew better. Rolando has been raiding and sailing along Duval for a very long time, long enough that he would understand him with ease despite his thick Arcosian accent. Rolando took another look at the priest, He already knew the answer, so why not play along? They had time to kill, after all. Too easy. His cloth is red and black. He holds a sword in his right hand. He's wearing an iron mask and iron chains around his waist. He'll pray to Valeros. Some shit about justice, condemnation, and judgment, most likely. Ha! Well, fuck me, then. Duval chuckled. I didn't take you to be such a devout choir boy. Attended a few confessions in your days, did you? Keep talking like that, and you'll find out just how much of a choir boy I can be. The two of them laughed off the moment, while a few people looked their way. They seemed to have unsettled the townsfolk. Here they were about to hang, and they were making jokes about it. People began whispering as they passed by. Not all of them had such a cavalier attitude about what was going to happen, but Rolando, Jean, and a few others seemed to be in good spirits, despite the ropes still chafing their necks raw. Our usual wager, then. Whoever is wrong pays the first round when we get back to the Bay of Anchors. Seems like a fool's bet at this point, but Meyer be damned, why not? Not like I have much else to entertain me right now. Once they agreed on their wager, all eyes turned to the priest once more. He'd given his own little pep talk as well. Honestly, at this point, this ceremony was going to drag on into the night with the pace they were keeping. Was this place really that dull? Regardless, he finally reached the prayer. And now, let us pray, for today we offer these souls to Valeros. In his name we cast these weary souls to the Titan's shadow. Rolando turned with a victorious smirk to Jean, who simply rolled his eyes and shook his head in response. Valeros, warden of the departed, slayer of the wicked, hear us. These souls, unworthy of mercy, now fall beneath the Titan's shadow. Judge them as you will, bind them as you must. Let the weight of their sins drag them into the dark beyond, and may your watchful gaze never waver. In your name the condemned are cast into the eclipse. It was apparent that the priest was enjoying the attention. Perhaps the presence of pirates in this town reassured him that the people's faith in their gods would be rekindled. More concerned followers meant more sermons. More sermons just meant more Velas for the dreadful bastard. Regardless, Rolando was getting impatient. This was taking way too long. Get on with it, you blubbering whale, he shouted from where he stood, drawing the attention of many townsfolk, as well as the priest and the governor, too. Duval snickered and threw in his own jab. Yeah, I'm sure you got little piggies oinking for you back at that oversized farmhouse you call a chapel, you sweaty fuck. Their insults and laughter stirred quite the scene. It wasn't just them either. After their remark, more of the pirates started laughing, not the ones in the cages. No, they dreaded every moment, based on how loudly they rattled their cages in hopes of something. Even a few of those at the gallows were looking at their crewmates with shock as well, and fiercely shaking their heads whenever a guard looked, as if to say, I'm not with them. That's enough out of you two. One of the guards struck both Duval and Rolando behind the head with the butt of his rifle and stopped the humor. Rolando simply turned his head without saying anything. He made sure to make memory of the guard's face from the corner of his eyes. When he came back, he would be one of the first. The priest and the crowd turned back to the gibbets, discarding the dreadful humor of the soon-to-be-executed as the rambling of dying men. The priest returned to his prayer. Perhaps it was another minute or two before he finished the whole thing, but after that first verse, Rolando had tuned it out. He knew the words and had no interest in humoring this display. He simply went back to his thoughts of how to become a legend, or thinking about the few pirates he knew within the Legion that did become legends. Really, anything to drown out the noise. But once the priest was done, there was no tuning out what came next. Once the prayer was done and the sentencing finished, they removed the cloth covering from the gibbets, exposing those within to the sun. Those in their cages wailed and screamed as the sunlight pierced their skin. The fetid smell of burning flesh filled the air as the members of the crew that were vampires began to smoke and catch on fire. Those who did not burn with the sun or took too long were set ablaze by pyres laid under their cages. It was a gruesome display, yet the crowds roared and cheered their demise. As far as they were concerned, they were doing the gods' work for them, ridding the world of dark beings intent on their destruction. Oh, if only they could see the irony in their behavior. After they finished with those who were turned, the air now filled with their ashes and stench. The bloodthirsty mob turned their attention to the pirates that would hang. The governor made his way to the platform where Rolando and Jean stood accompanied by that prideful priest. "Listen, mate," Rolando called to the priest as he passed before them. Matteo Soriano was his name from what he heard. "If you're going to give another prayer for us, make it quick, huh? Some of us have better things to do, you know." Reverend Soriano spit in Rolando's face. "Filthy, unwashed heathen." "Unwashed?" Rolando sniffed himself. "I'll have you know I wash quite frequently for a seafarer." "Arrogant as well. Do you think laughing in the face of death makes you special? That this blustering display will make this day memorable? You will die here, worm. Your body will rot beneath our soil, and you will be forgotten. All of you." Soriano's words struck a nerve with Rolando. He'd seen the priest's kind before, all bark and no bite. He hated the kind of man that would taunt a person who couldn't fight back. Easy to taunt a shark when it was out of the water. It sickened him. Rolando withdrew the smile from his lips, and he whispered through gritted teeth, all humor drained from his tone. "Then I suggest you pray to Maressa instead of Valeros." He stared down the priest like a growling dog. "And pray she keeps you safe tonight and your locks tight." The priest flinched slightly, but reassured himself. Bold words from a dead man. Rolando couldn't help but to chuckle. "Exactly." Soriano moved on, ignoring his vague threats as he approached the platform's center, as the governor once again began listing their crimes and sins, and dragging out the execution for as long as he could. All the while, Rolando never took his eyes off of the priest. Meanwhile, Duval had his sharp eyes fixed on the governor as he went on. "When we come back, I want this fucking governor. He talks too much, and I want his tongue as a prize." Then the priest followed, continuing his prayers and rants, all much harder to ignore up close. Rolando leaned over as far as he could before whispering to Duval, "You do that. I want the priest. That bastard has it." The words were caught in his throat as well as his breath once the platform were pulled beneath their feet, and they were dropped just enough for the ropes to tighten around their necks. Rolando gagged, trying to move his throat or force his neck to tense, instincts kicking in, trying to find a way to keep him alive. For all their bravado and even knowing what would come next, they were still mortal, and still their bodies, if not themselves, feared death and responded accordingly. The pressure around their throats tightened. He started seeing spots before his vision blurred and darkened, until, finally, silence. Nothingness. It was hard to tell how much time had passed, but Rolando knew what time it should have been. Midnight. But being dead for that long didn't exactly aid his senses. Not at first, at least. As he regained consciousness, he realized he was still bound and hanging. He didn't expect this town to be the type that leaves such a spectacle, but he was nonetheless thankful for it. Better to wake up to fresh air rather than digging himself out of the dirt. Still, this was annoying. He still felt the rope tight around his neck, but he wasn't struggling to breathe. In fact, he wasn't breathing at all. There was no inherent need to now. He expected others to be more quick about it, but he simply hung there, contemplating his next move. The crew next to him also coming to. None could really talk, not with the nooses squeezing their windpipes still. He looked around in the dark and realized just how much sharper his eyesight was now. He could see shapes, figures, and forms with such clarity in the pitch black so precise that he could tell apart each members of the crew, those who were hung and buried, who were already making their way to the gallows between alleys after digging themselves out from their shallow graves. They reached the gallows quickly and began cutting down those that were still hanging, each of them risen, their debts, to the schemer claimed. When they were on the ground, most of them took off their cut nooses, not Rolando. He kept his loose around his neck. He wanted the priest to see it when he found him tonight, and he will find him. Now that they were on the ground, the reality of their newfound forms kicked in. Rolando and the others struggled to gather their senses, which had grown terrifyingly sharp. Rolando could hear sounds so soft and distant that it was overwhelming. The creaking of beds as people turned in their sleep, snoring from distant houses, and yet he could pinpoint which snores were coming from which houses. Wild land critters scurrying in the dark, he could tell their sizes, their footprints, and even their breathing. Smells clung to his nose with fierce intensity. The salt of the sea, the murk from nearby marshes, copper, sweat, the mold on rotten produce, the stench from waste tossed out of windows. It was all too much. It was hard to draw away from all that. But then he noticed the one thing that stood out most of all. A thirst. Not a hunger, no. A hunger you could live with. You could stave it off and fight through it. This was a thirst unlike any other. All the seawater in all the oceans couldn't cause a thirst. This intense. It was as if he'd never known the taste of water or refreshment in his life. The innate need to quell this thirst was almost as strong as the instinctual feeling he felt as he was hanging to breathe. Rolando turned to the others, some still reeling, some already grinning with fangs bared. They didn't speak yet, but they didn't have to. Not really. The look in their eyes said it all. Lastly, he turned his arm to himself and saw it. The tattoo that once bound him to the mark of Kainari was now fading from his skin, burning into his flesh. And though he could not see it, he knew it was burning into his soul. He could see they had all claimed their mark, and grinned. The red toll has been paid, lads. Rolando grabbed one of the knives from one of the other guys and raised it. The rest raised theirs as well, all riled with bloodlust, shining in their now crimson eyes. Now, let's quench our thirst. Is that what justice looks like to you? A crowd cheering as men burn in cages, a priest spitting scripture between executions. They called him a blasphemer, a heretic, a fiend, and yet he returned. They took his breath and broke his body, but even then it wasn't enough to stop the tides of blood that followed. Rolando Altamar's immortality was not a gift. It was a curse engineered by gods and broken by men, a man who escaped death and still lost his soul all the same. And to the apostles who branded him evil, tell me, what does that make you? How are such spectacles considered righteous? We are evolving as a people. Nethermoor is proof of that. What use will your gods have when we already hold the reins over death itself? Consider this, dear listener, next time you kneel to pray. The gods may be listening. But when a god answers your prayer, will it be worth the price they demand? Be sure to ponder this. Until next, we turn the page.